Hello and welcome to YAGR, your one-stop shop for high-quality game reviews. Today and the rest of this week, we will be reviewing Agents of Mayhem by the studio that brought to you Saints Row, the series. So, Volition has brought us many games like Saints Row. In fact, Saints Row 1 through, I believe it's 4, plus a little bit of a bonus game. I wouldn't really call it a full game, but get out of hell, basically. And then they brought out Agents of Mayhem, which I didn't really hear too much about, but I guess there was a bit of hype going on before it launched. And we've got about 4 hours for our initial thoughts on Agents of Mayhem. One of the reasons YAGR was interested in doing Agents of Mayhem is because there's been a lot of bad publicity around it. Apparently, at release, there was basically an embargo on videos and content for, I think, a couple hours, at least one. And that was really interesting, and usually that's a huge red flag saying there's a problem with the game. And a lot of people were reporting serious frame issues and the game just being a total hog on their PC. But I'm not personally seeing that effect, so it might have to do with the way your system is set up, and I don't think everyone is experiencing that. However, that just means the game isn't optimized properly, and there are some settings within the game that do start on that seriously impact gameplay, like dropping frames way below playable level. So that's a big concern, and that's kind of why we were interested in doing Agents of Mayhem, is to see how all of this criticism holds up a little bit after the release, giving them a couple days to fix some of these problems. And as far as the frame stuff and things like that, we haven't felt that big of an issue here at YAGR. It hasn't impacted us, but there are other things about the game that aren't something as simple as patching for optimization that are a problem. So we're going to go over the few things that we've noticed at the beginning for our initial review here, our first impressions, that were kind of problems. First off, the vehicle handling in the game is not as good as previous games this company has done. I mean, I know they can do vehicles pretty well, and this just kind of feels... It feels like a really low center of gravity. It's difficult to maneuver in the vehicle. Granted, we've only unlocked a couple and tried a few different ones. There's plenty of vehicle options within the game, so that might be different based off of what you're driving, things like that. But right now, it feels a little difficult to maneuver with the vehicles. On top of that, the system they have when you're in the vehicle is the bad guys will chase you in their vehicles, and they'll try to push you off the road and hurt you and drive into you and stuff like that. There's no good way to avoid that. Their vehicles are going to be faster than yours, and there's no, like, shooting while you're in the car or having a car with guns, at least that we know of yet, or anything like that. So that's a bit of a pain in the ass, and you pretty much just have to run them into obstacles. As you get better at it, it's not quite as big of a deal, but it's a little bit of a struggle, and it can be just a real ball ache sometimes. As far as that goes, that kind of gives us a summary of the vehicles. The vehicle play isn't that exciting. I would not recommend the game if that's what you're looking for in this game, but we also, again, have just started, so our opinions may change over time with that. Another thing I wanted to bring up that's pretty important as far as problems that we've had with the game is there's something called pop-in, which is basically the maximum distance that something comes into the player's view. Basically, it's a system to keep games running well so that you don't load the entire game altogether and everything is processing at the same time and rendered at the same time, which is obviously going to slow you down. It renders what's relevant to you where you are. This game has an extremely short range of pop-in, and as you can see in the footage, and as has happened in the footage already, this short pop-in has caused some serious problems. You're kind of guided and recommended on the best path, particularly when you're driving, but also when you're running around. And this short-end pop-in can really affect your ability to make split decision judgments, because you're unaware that the turn you need to take is coming up, because the graphic telling you, hey, you need to turn here, doesn't show up until you're just about at the turn. And it's things that are more important and less important than that have serious pop-in problems. Vehicles in oncoming lanes or turning into your lane, things like that, don't pop in until pretty close to last second reaction timing. And then features on buildings like signs and stuff, they don't pop in until you're maybe a block away from them in the city. So that's something that is kind of weird. Like, it's 2017 now, folks. Games can do better than that. So that's something that's a little disappointing about it. It can provide a little bit of a struggle, but it doesn't impact actual gameplay too terribly much. It's just something about the quality that is really disappointing to see, especially from a company that's created such enjoyable and good games in the past. So moving on from that, the gunplay is pretty entertaining. Basically, you get to build up a team of a series of superhero-esque people, whether they have powers or they just have some pretty effective gear, is case-by-case basis, more or less. But it's entertaining to be able to build your team and actively swap through it on the field, which is pretty interesting. The swapping is more or less seamless. Typically, you'll be able to take 3 agents into the field. And the whole theme of it being this comic book action hero, but it's bad versus evil, like, there's no heroes, there's just evil and not so evil. It's kind of entertaining. It's not going to hit everyone as far as the aesthetic goes, but overall the game looks very comic booky and enjoyable. It's playing to the company's strong suit, especially in the past with Saints Row having the same similar theme. And it's full of either rough and gruff comedy or very shallow, cheeky comedy. Sometimes there's some things worth a laugh, but it's really just throwing a bunch of goofy stuff at you most of the time when it comes to the comedic aspect from what we've seen. One of the cool things about integrating the aesthetic into the game, though, because that's what I brought up, is when you go to pick up new heroes and things like that, or when you do special hero-specific missions, you get kind of like this comic book play-out thing going on, and it feels like you're reading the issue for that hero, and it's a special episode, and then you play through it, and it's pretty cool. The aesthetic is really neat, I think, and it's kind of a shame that this game is getting such bad publicity from a lot of the people reviewing and playing it, and part of that shame that I feel and that sadness that I feel about that comes from this company hasn't branched out and done too terribly much else outside of Saints Row. And they're trying to increase their branding and show that they can do other things. And just like when you try to do something new, it's not going to be perfect the first time. And I don't think anyone's ever made a perfect video game in general, to start with that. But that's going down a rabbit hole. The point I'm making is, this is a step into a different direction for an organization that can make good games. And if the community bashes on them, then they're going to be stifled, and maybe the next great game that was going to come out from them isn't going to come out because everyone shit-talked a game that didn't necessarily need to be bashed on quite so hard. Mechanically, it feels sound so far. It's a little flighty and draggy with some of the commands and things, but that's kind of the nature of the comic book theme they're going for. And then there were some performance issues, but outside of that, the game handles perfectly fine. The gunplay is perfectly solid, you get unlocks, you're managing this superhero-esque organization, and there's some fun little things related to that. And there's some serious character progression that you feel throughout the game. So I think this game has some really good things going for it. The problem is, it's getting run into the ground based on performance issues that people had at launch, among other small, tiny gripes. So, basically what we're saying is, this is our first impressions. It has promise. There are a couple issues we've noticed, but there's a reasonable amount of the game that's solid. So moving forward this week with our review of Agents of Mayhem, we're going to take a very hard and very unbiased look at what the game does well and what it doesn't do well. And that is going to give, we hope, a concise and comprehensive picture of whether Agents of Mayhem should be considered a good game or not for you, the individual consumer. So take that into consideration as we move forward, and trust us at YAGR when we say we want to give it the most honest review possible. and that is going to be trying to dig through bias from other people's opinions about the game and share what we truly think and what we've discovered throughout playing it. That being said, thanks for watching. This has been the YAGR team. Come back on Wednesday for our deep dive and Friday for our final verdict, and we'll see you online soon.